Hello there, Lunar Squadron, and welcome back to the channel. We have entered the final week before Marvel Spider-Man 2. We are now less than a week away from finally getting our hands on this game. I cannot believe that the time has finally arrived. And today we have a brand new interview with Yuri Lowenthal. He sat down with Collider and had this lengthy interview and provided a lot of great new insight into some story details, some symbiote details, some relationship and character and villain details. There's so much great stuff in this interview. We're going to break down all of the great stuff for you today. But before we do that, if you're new to the channel, we would love to have you as always. And the way to do that, just go down below this video, hit that little subscribe button, the bell notification right on next to it. It'll notify you every single time that Andreas and I upload. Now with that out of the way, Andreas, are you ready to jump into this interview and all these brand new details?
Oh yeah, let's do this, guys. Today's article is out of Collider.com. It is titled Marvel Spider-Man 2's Yuri Lowenthal on 19 inches of Venom and keeping the story grounded. This is written by Michael Thomas, and I really hope he didn't title it, because if he did, I would give him some shit for it. But Nick, this one's a long one. If you guys want to read through the entire article, go read the whole article. We're going to be picking some of our highlights from this article, and there's some really cool stuff, including some teases at some new villains in this game. So we are really looking forward to this discussion. Nick, I just want to kick this off with Michael Thomas's first question here. He says, first off, everything we've seen from it looks absolutely incredible. And that kind of leads off with my first question. Spider-Man PS4 came out in 2018, and Peter went through a lot of traumatic events in that story. What was it like getting back into that mindset and seeing the evolution of Peter Parker? And Lowenthal responds, he says, "It was great. When I first got the outline to the game, because when they said they were going to do it and they sort of thought about the story, I got an outline and it was super exciting. And yet I'm like, oh yeah, so there's more trauma for Peter. It's not going to get any easier on Peter. Oh no." And then I realized that nothing ever gets easier for Peter, so it kind of tracked. But one of the things that immediately keyed me in was how all the relationships change, both with relationships that he's had in the previous games with characters like Miles and MJ, but also getting to see and develop relationships with people like Harry, which is a hugely important relationship in this game. So that was super exciting. Nick, I just want to pause here for just one moment and acknowledge that, again, this is going to be a hard moment in Peter's life. He's going to be going through some trauma here, and this is as expected, especially if you guys have been tuning in on our recent discussions. We've been talking about all of the sensitive connections that are at play in this game. The stakes of this game are higher than ever, with so many near and dear characters to both Peter and Miles, and with villains who are bigger and badder than ever before. We know that there's going to be more trauma in this game. It's kind of just a matter of how much trauma, not a matter of if there's going to be any trauma, and Yuri Lowenthal is straight up confirming that in this quote. At this point in the interview, Yuri goes on and he says, "Then of course, knowing that I would get the symbiote and would have to play a fundamentally different kind of Peter Parker for a while was also super exciting, because actors love to play villains. But I wasn't aware of how hard it would be to make Peter bad. Peter is your friendly neighborhood Spider-Man, and making him sort of act in a way that's antithetical to who he is, putting people before him, to become selfish, trying to take care of people, to become violent, all of those things, and finding a way to make that, you know, in the past, sometimes if you just slap the symbiote on Peter and all of a sudden he's Bully Maguire, it can be comical at times, and that was something that they really wanted to take a great amount of care with in this game. They didn't want it to feel like a joke or a parody or a meme. So while I'm sure this game will spawn a million memes, they wanted to keep it grounded, and that all happened with the relationships and power dynamics and how things change from the last games, both the first game and the DLC and the Miles game that we've seen. So I'm just excited for people to go on that journey with us, because I was excited to get into it. Nick, my favorite part of this quote here, and what I really want to hone in on, is how they are going to be tonally playing with the symbiote suit here. And I find it really interesting that they've looked at models of the symbiote in the past, and they've actively decided not to go the Bully Maguire path here, where it was made a complete meme. They're going with a more serious tone. Again, this plays hand in hand with the whole trauma arc that they're trying to put forward, but is this a sign that maybe they're going to be abandoning some of that Spider-Man banter and humor that we expect with this character? Is this going to be the best change of pace for this character? And finally, like, is this what you expected out of this game? Like, were you expecting a more serious tone and a complete tonal shift from what we've seen with the whole Bully Maguire vibe in the past?
I mean, it's not like these previous stories were not serious stories. You know, Spider-Man 3 was a serious movie, and then, of course, think back to the animated series in the 90s with the whole Shocker meme. Like, they were still trying to be serious, but they weren't able to fully capture the seriousness of the moment, and hence those memes were spawned. And, of course, he says that there will probably be memes that come out of how this is handled, because, like, this relationship and this dynamic is just straight up ridiculous for Peter, like, the situation that he's placed in. But what this just confirms and reassures to me is that Insomniac went out of their way to just express how serious this situation actually is for Peter, because this isn't a joke. And, like, while those memes might come from it, that's not the intent. It's not supposed to be funny. Like, Spider-Man is a funny character. He always has those one-liners. He has those quips, but not here with the symbiote. This is not meant to be funny. It is meant to be a very serious, violent, and dangerous thing, and that is exactly what Insomniac is trying to accomplish with the story of this game. And then he shifts into this next question where he says, you mentioned his relationships and how vital of a role those play in this story. This isn't the first time we've met Peter again since that first game. We did have the DLC. He was also in the Miles Morales game. What is his relationship like with Miles, and what was it like working with Najee Jeter, who's also voicing Miles Morales? And Yuri says, I mean, me and Najee have known each other since the first game. Much like Peter does in this game with Miles, I've gotten to watch Najee grow up and come into his own and really tune into his power and who he is. So while that doesn't happen with every game, you don't get to enjoy that mirroring of a relationship in real life and in a game. It's just so happened that it worked out this way for this. I love seeing that relationship play out in the game, because the first game was more Pete's game, the second game was obviously more Miles' game, and this one is very even-handed. Both of them get powerful journeys, and you really get to see Miles come into his own and really stand in his power. At certain points throughout the game, the relationship tips where Miles is guiding Pete, where Pete loses his way and Miles has to become very heavy-handed. Without giving too much away, he steps beyond the mentorship and into tough love. Now, of course, Andreas, I think the obvious takeaway from this quote is this last little segment where he talks about how, you know, Miles actually turns out to be guiding Pete through this, because Peter has lost his way with the symbiote. Like, he has lost control. That's kind of what we're expecting now from the insight that we've gotten into this game and from the story insight that we've gotten from the trailers and these interviews. And here we have confirmation from Yuri that, yeah, Miles is going to have to take a step up, and he's actually going to have to guide Pete, and it's going to be tough love. It's not going to be a very nurturing, like, oh no, Pete, like, what happened, man? It's gonna be heavy-handed. Like, he's probably gonna have to, you know, beat the shit out of him a little bit in this game. I'm expecting something like that. So just cool insight here from Yuri, kind of confirming what we're expecting to have happen with this relationship.
You know, Nick, this quote from Yuri Lowenthal is really making me wonder whether we are going to have a full-out, like, brawl between Miles and Peter. Like, is that what it's going to take to finally snap Pete out of it? Nick, we've talked about this in, I think, our most recent video about how Pete will ultimately come to that realization of I've taken this symbiote thing too far. It's turning me into someone that I'm not. It's really warping my values here. I'm wondering if it is going to take something like a full-on confrontation that gets physical between Miles, where Miles shows Pete that he is, even without a symbiote suit, more powerful, with the strength of just a well-principled Spider-Man, with the well-principled Spider-Man values that are not apparent with the symbiote suit. I'm wondering if that's what's going to happen. So really interested to see how that plays out. But of course, guys, we have more article to get through here on other even more interesting things. Starting off with this question here, where Thomas says, it's one of those things where the symbiote, Venom, all of those elements that we are very familiar with, but we don't really see Miles interact in that side of the story, right? By the time Miles is introduced, this part of Peter's life has already been told with this relationship with Venom and the symbiote. So I'm really fascinated to see where he fits into that story, and the relationship between the two kind of builds from there. Lowenthal responds saying, again, one of the things that I think Insomniac does well, and they do it again with this, is they take characters and scenarios that we know very well. We know Venom, we know how that plays out, we know Miles, we know Pete, and they give us those things that we love about those characters that we're looking forward to seeing in that kind of story, but it's turned a little bit so that you have to stay on your toes. There's different stuff in there, and they've always been really good at creating that. Nick, this is again confirming that Insomniac will be putting that Insomniac spin on things, so go into this game expecting something new. We know what to generally expect out of these characters, but put in Insomniac's hands, anything can happen in this story.
Yeah, my biggest takeaway from this is that this story, it will feel familiar, it will feel like Spider-Man, but of course, there's going to be those twists and turns, so there's going to be those moments where you're like, oh my god, I cannot believe that just happened. Honestly, this quote was one of my favorite from this entire interview because it got me excited to see what exactly Insomniac is going to pull off with the story of this game. I'm very excited to see just what the end game is with Venom and the symbiote and Kraven and Lizard and all of these villains and the relationships. Like, there's a lot to juggle here, and I'm just excited to see how Insomniac pulls it off in their game. Then we get to this next question where it says, not much of a stretch at all. Keeping with the animal theme, though, they were talking about animals in this interview to provide some context. Like, there was a mention of a spider sloth and a spider shark. This interview kind of goes off the rails. If you guys want to go see that segment of the interview, definitely go check out this interview on Collider. It does get incredibly unhinged, but this question continues with, though we have Kraven the Hunter in this game, we had a lot of villains in the first game. Are there any villains that you would like to see? I know we've gone through the big rogues gallery. Are there any villains you'd like to see in a potential third game that didn't make it in these first two? Shout out to the interviewer trying to get some little soft confirmation that there's a third Spider-Man game. I see what he's doing there, and I respect it. But Lowenthal says, it's tough, and I certainly don't want to spoil things for people who are just getting started playing this game or who haven't played it yet. I will just comment by saying that second to maybe Batman, or maybe on par with Batman, Spider-Man has the greatest rogues gallery. I agree, Yuri. Batman's rogues gallery is incredible. And then this segment continues with, yeah, there's a lot to choose from. And Lowenthal says, by putting Venom in this game, which is certainly no spoiler at this point, but all 19 inches of Venom, it's sort of taken out the villain that has dominated the spotlight for the last 25 years or something like that. So where do you go next? I mean, do you go to smaller, not as well-known villains and turn them into something else? Do you go way back to like Tarantula and be like, okay, he's not as goofy as you think if we told this story about him? Or, you know, Big Wheel. And this guy chimes in with the reimagining of Big Wheel. And Yuri says, right, exactly. What if Big Wheel was the big bad for Spider-Man 3? That would be awesome is what it would be. And then the guy says, of course it would be. And then here's where Yuri kind of takes home this segment, and this is the really exciting part of this interview where he says, so I don't know. Again, Insomniac is really good about taking something that we've seen before and spinning it so that you get something new. So you could almost go with anyone. But I can't wait for people to see some of the villains that we've snuck into this game without you knowing. I can't wait to see some surprise look on many faces. Andreas, whoa. Here we have Yuri saying that, hey, we put villains in this game that you guys have no clue. Not talking Lizard, I'm not talking Kraven, and I'm talking Venom. We got some new villains coming to this game that we have no idea who they're going to be. Now, of course, we have some inclination that a Mysterio is going to show up in this game and possibly even a Sandman, but this is pretty exciting confirmation here from Yuri. Like, we got some big twists and some big surprises coming next week.
Yeah, Nick, I'm really wondering if Lowenthal is hinting at some of those lower tier, I don't want to call them lower tier, but like not the main bads that they've been highlighting in this game. Like you were mentioning, we had a suspicion based on recent materials that Mysterio is going to be in this game. We have recent suspicions that Prowler is going to be in this game just based on the icons and the menus. But I'm wondering if Yuri's talking about something entirely different out of left field that no one, not even us, you and I, Nick, who we've been picking apart frame by frame all of these trailers and all these articles on our channel. I'm wondering how left field these new villains they've snuck in are going to be, because if they pull one over on us, then I know everyone is going to be super hyped to see exactly what ends up popping up in this game. Like, I just get this feeling, Nick, that anything could happen in this game, and that's just a really exciting mentality to be entering a game cycle with. Like, I'm so excited to see how this plays out.
Yeah, me too. And the last thing I want to add before we get out of here is that Norman Osborn, Green Goblin, he should be the big bad of Spider-Man 3, not Big Wheel or Tarantula. Like, I love the energy, Yuri. I love the ideas and trying to think outside the box, but I think it's pretty obvious that, like, Green Goblin deserves his time in the spotlight in this franchise, so I really hope that is the direction that they go in, and I'm incredibly excited to see if by the end of the story, that is what Insomniac has set up going into a potential and inevitable third Marvel Spider-Man game. Cannot wait. But guys, let us know your thoughts down below in the comments of all of this brand new insight from Yuri himself into the story, the villains, the relationships of Marvel Spider-Man 2. We really are just a few days away from being able to find out for ourselves. So guys, let us know your thoughts down below in the comments, and let us know what you are most excited for when it comes to Marvel Spider-Man 2. Of course, we're all excited about the story, but, you know, get a little deeper than that. Is there a certain gameplay aspect or a location you're excited to go to? Definitely let us know. And guys, please, no spoilers, no leaks down in the comments. That kind of happened in our last video, and we kind of had to shut the comments off. So please, guys, don't do that. Don't ruin this game for other people. It's not cool. Like, we're just a few days away. Let people experience this for themselves. But anyway, guys, that is going to do it for us for this one. Thank you all so much for watching, and as always, we will see you all next time.